Bhavik Lathia is a political strategist and technologist. He's led campaigns in India, Australia, and the US, and supported activists around the world as they built and executed strategies superpowered by technology. He recently served as Battleground Mobilization Director on the Harris-Walz campaign. Before that, he was senior digital director for WisDems. He helped lead the distributed organizing team on the Bernie 2020 campaign and served as digital director for Color of Change. This past month, he was one of several Democratic strategists quoted in a New York Times piece on the idea of dark woke. So let's start at the top. What the hell is dark woke and why does it matter? Also, thank you for coming, but talk to us about dark woke.
Hi, Josh. Longtime listener. Excited to be on. Hello, merch tag. Yeah, dark woke. It's all the hype right now. And essentially, the way that I talked about it in the New York Times article and how I think about it is dark woke is Democrats breaking out of the respectability prison that Republicans have put us in for decades and finally saying shit and doing things that stop voters in their tracks and actually get their attention. Another way to think about it is dark woke is Democrats being more spicy and getting more strategic about their communications and political action strategies.
Okay. Do you know where the term came from? Is it an extension of, dark, like from the Biden campaign, or is it something new altogether? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, well, I selected this coffee mug this morning.
Yeah, show it off.
The origins of dark woke are from the internet. As far as I can tell, it started with a dark Brandon meme.
Okay.
Lots of people, I don't know if you remember during President Biden's term, there was like this whole thing about Republicans calling Joe Biden Brandon. And
I remember well, for sure.
Yeah, and people in the opposition, Democrats, progressives, leftists, just anybody who wasn't MAGA, started doing these dark Brandon memes, which was, anytime Joe Biden and his administration would do something like awesome, punchy, effective, the Inflation Reduction Act, the largest climate investment in U.S. history, all that kind of good stuff, they would post memes of dark Brandon.
Dark Brandon, yeah.
And I think that just became kind of like a rallying cry of Democrats communicating in edgier ways, at least on the internet to start off with.
Do you think that held throughout the Harris campaign, or did we take a break from it, or it was just so ingrained in the Harris campaign that we didn't need to call her? Yeah, there's also problematic components of calling her Dark Harris as opposed to Dark Biden and whatnot, Dark Brandon. But do you think that was embedded into the Harris campaign, or are we walked away from it and now it's time to come back to it? What's your reading on that?
Well, I think this whole dark woke trend that's happening right now, I want to kind of one thing that I want to say at the top is that a mutual of mine on LinkedIn spoke about how dark woke is yet another misappropriation of the term woke. So I don't love the term, and I'm very open to suggestions for what we should call this edgier, more attention-grabby communication strategy the Democrats are now taking.
Okay.
All that being said, dark woke isn't just about Joe Biden, right? It is about Democrats doing and saying things that optimize for getting attention. We all want our messages. We all want to drive our message to voters, build narratives that help us win campaigns, but we can't do any of that unless we first get the attention of voters. And Republicans have basically spent my entire life, the past few decades, investing in and optimizing for talents and topic that grab voters' attention. And Democrats basically started caring about attention as a strategy on November 6, 2024. Mm-hmm. So even though there was this dark Brandon, dark woke meme that came out during Biden's term, I don't actually think that it was a communications approach that was deeply ingrained and widespread within the party until after the election. And so yes, we did like cool, effective, edgy, attention-grabbing things on the Harris-Walz campaign, but I will say, I don't think that we did enough to grab voters' attention, and that is what resulted in the result that we got.
So you've mentioned memes several times, because obviously like Dark Brandon started as a meme, but like what role do memes and humor play in the idea of dark woke? Like how much of this is about like using comedy and like attention to get across the message versus finding, like Chris Murphy's not doing that and he's finding ways to get attention. Like there are certainly other things you can do, especially if you're a sitting US senator. Cory Booker doesn't need humor to be able to get attention for standing on the Senate floor for 25 hours, but the average person has a very hard time breaking through on the internet right now. And do you think humor is integral? Is it like part of the DNA of the moment, or are there other ways to break through, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think humor helps, and memes specifically. Like, what are memes? Like, memes are an image or a short video that you see online that is immediately referential to a specific idea, right? So memes are helpful in reinforcing a specific message or idea. And so when you see, for example, this like Dark Brandon meme, it's the idea of like Democrats not giving a shit, living our values, fighting for the things we believe in. Like, it doesn't matter what Republicans say or do, we are going to fight for what we believe in. But I think you're right? Like memes and humor are not the only way to engage here, right? If the core concept, the core idea is strategies that grab and hold attention to drive our messages, build our narratives, and win elections, there's lots and lots of ways of doing that. As you mentioned, Cory Booker with his 25-hour filibuster, which, if I can, I want to take a second to go aside there. There's been a lot of debate online on like, was it good? Was it bad? Was it effective? Was it just, was it just words? I think it was insanely effective. I think his filibuster, and I want to talk about why. He launched the filibuster on a day when we had 3 really important elections happening across the country. A special in Florida. I think, was it 2 specials in Florida?
Yeah, there were 2 in Florida.
Yeah, 2 specials in Florida. And obviously the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. And, you and I know, Josh, that everything that campaigners and strategists do before election day makes a difference. But what the media chatter and the media environment is on election day does impact voters as they head into the voting booth. So the fact that Cory Booker's filibuster about the devastating cuts to Medicaid and Medicare that are coming as a result of Trump 2.0, the fact that that is what was in the media zeitgeist and what people were hearing as they were going to the poll on election day, I just think is unbelievably strategic. Like, what Republicans tend to do is when there are major election days, you'll see Fox News begin to talk about the immigrant caravan coming up.
They love that caravan on election days. Yeah.
They are smart and they understand that like the media environment on election day impacts voters as they head into the voting booth. Cory Booker did all of us a real solid so that in Wisconsin, as voters were heading to the voting booth to vote on this really important Supreme Court election, like, this is what they were hearing about. This is what the news cycle was about. And so from that perspective, from just purely helping us win elections, that was the Cory Booker's filibuster strategy was effective. The other way that it was effective is that it ended up getting, I'm not sure exactly how many, but at least a few 100 million views on TikTok. And anytime when you can, as an elected official, engage in a strategy that gets that much attention and that many views, that's a good thing, right? And we saw that after his filibuster, all of his national polling skyrocketed. And that wasn't a mistake. That's because he actually did grab the attention of the nation over that 25-hour period. And so I think, I don't know if we want to call that dark woke, right? If dark woke is a strategy that's just about grabbing and holding attention, then yes, it falls under dark woke. We may want to call it something else, but other examples of this are the really great rallies that AOC, Bernie, and Tim Walz are doing across the country. The rallies and town halls, they are getting massive audiences. AOC is, showing up in red states like Idaho, and thousands of people are coming out. There's like so much energy on the ground. Again, capturing attention, capturing energy, redirecting it to drive our message. I also really like what Pete Buttigieg has been doing. I think a lot of people, Gavin Newsom is an example of someone who is trying to engage right-leaning content creators, but doing it in the exact wrong way. Like, I think it was a massive mistake for him to invite
Charlie Kirk.
Charlie Kirk is one thing, but the mastermind behind
Steve Bannon,
MAGA takeover of the Constitution, Steve Bannon. I just like rolled my eyes so hard. Like, there have to be red lines, and like Steve Bannon is like, he's kind of like Darth Sidious. He is like the arch villain, behind the empire. And so I didn't love his approach. But Pete, right? He goes on to this. It's really an entertainment podcast more than anything, but lots of like MAGA curious or right-leaning men, and he just has a long conversation about whatever they want to talk about. He's authentic to himself. He is like succinct. He is clear. He doesn't back away from his values. He makes the case for democratic values, and that's just another. I mean, he got so much attention out of that, right? Like he drove the discourse for a week across multiple platforms and across the mainstream media news cycle. And so, look, we have AOC, Bernie, P, Tim Walz, like across the ideological spectrum, Democrats who have engaged in these kinds of attention-grabby, dark woke strategies, and I love it. Like, I think this is one of the reasons why Trump's approval ratings are going down. Like, the floor has kind of opened up underneath them, is because we're finally doing things that are capturing the attention of voters and driving the messages that we want them to hear, that we need them to hear.
I think it's worth also reflecting like the difference between like the Gavin Newsom and the Pete Buttigieg like response. Like, obviously podcast became the massive word after the election, right? Like, Trump went on these podcasts and then he won. So clearly the podcast matters, but like Gavin Newsom and his like, staff seem to like think, okay, the answer is podcast. But what Pete is showing is that it's not about podcasts, it's about audiences. And it's about finding audiences where they are. What Gavin did is create a massive platform for himself, but he has to bring in his own audience, which defeats the entire purpose of like why this matters. If Donald Trump had his own podcast, he wasn't going to swing independent voters and like, MAGA curious voters. He had to go on the podcast where those people were already listening. And so I think Mayor Pete like certainly is doing this better than anyone. I mean, since he's been on the scene, like his mastery of the ability to like sit down and sound like a normal person while, making cogent arguments about like the progressive movement has been impressive. But yeah, we're seeing this a lot. Like, it's not just Gavin Newsom. Like, Andy Bashir has his own podcast. We're seeing more and more Democrats start podcasts. And it's like they only read the first half of the memo. Like, they missed the idea that it's not about the podcast, it's about the audience. And I think that we're at risk of missing the opportunity to like understand what went wrong and build on it. And like, I would like to see a lot more Mayor Pete's right now than Gavin Newsom's when it comes to podcasting strategy. That's for sure.
Yeah, me too.
We're ceding that space because we're trying to create our own spaces, which defeats the whole purpose of exactly what we're saying what the problem was.
Yeah, and I will say on the other side, like if you are going to build a podcast strategy, build your own podcast, I think Andy Bashir is like doing it the right way. His podcast is about himself and his values, right? It's not like launching the podcast by having a lot of like extremist, right-wing, anti-constitution like lunatics on to try to like grab their audience. He is trying to build an audience of people who are interested in his story are compelled by his values. And so, yeah, I think there is
I think that's a good distinction. I think you're right. Like Gavin Newsom is trying to get attention, and Bashir is trying to tell a story, and those are very different. And then again, Pete is trying to find audiences that he can sway. So that's three very different approaches. I think Mayor Pete has the best chance of actually helping us like win independent voters. But Andy Bashir, it's you could think of it similar to like Obama writing the story of his father. Like if you think about it, a podcast is simply like another way to tell the story. That's great. But I agree. Like what Gavin is doing is trying to like find right wingers who then he's not even arguing with. He's just ceding ground to them. So, like I was very confused by his strategy, but I think that's a good distinction between him and what Bashir are doing. So
yeah, absolutely.
I haven't listened yet. I should check it out. Have you tuned in? Is it good?
Yeah, I listened to like part of one episode. I just really like Governor Bashir, man.
Yeah. He's great.
He is so genuine, and the way that he talks about his Christian values and how that drives him to do things like sign legislation that bans evil LGBTQ conversion therapy.
In deep red Kentucky, he is letting his values guide him, and he's still popular. Like I know he's like term limited out, but like he could probably win another election. Like he is a great example of how you can live your values anywhere. And yeah, it's a bummer that more Democrats don't follow that example for sure.
And that's what voters care about, right? Like they care about like authenticity and like what are your values and are you being real with me? And can I trust you to do the right thing and fight on my behalf? And oftentimes I feel like on our side, in the opposition at the moment, we take away the wrong messages about what voters care about. And I'm glad that we have leaders like Andy Bashir and Pete Buttigieg and AOC who are kind of modeling a better path forward, for the lack of a better term.
Yeah, you once told me, like a while back, that your goal was to we as a party should be creating content that South Asian communities would share in their WhatsApp chains. Are we getting closer to that kind of digital strategy, do you think? Like, did the Harris campaign live that concept? Or why don't you describe what I'm talking about in your own words? But that really stuck with me. I thought that was a really powerful way to think about it. And now I feel like people talk about that, but you and I talked about this a while ago, and it was like pretty interesting when I heard it for the first time from you a while back.
Yeah, well, for listeners who might not know, WhatsApp is, if not the most, then like in the top 5 of the most popular messaging apps on the planet in South Asia and the South Asian.
It's like soccer. Any place they play soccer, they use WhatsApp, which is everywhere but America.
That's right. WhatsApp.
That's how I think about it.
Insanely popular in international communities and immigrant communities, and yeah, when I worked in India in 2015, 16, 17, a lot of what we were trying to figure out is how can we leverage WhatsApp to reach and mobilize grassroots supporters to take action on the campaigns that we were running and launching. And it was so effective. There was this campaign that I helped run, which was around stopping urban deforestation in Bangalore, which is a huge issue. The air quality in Bangalore has gotten really bad over the last decade or more. And Bangalore is like one of these places in South India that historically it was known as this lush, green, clean, beautiful city. It's the Silicon Valley of India. That is where all of the tech firepower and industry of India really originates and lives. But when I lived there, my day-to-day existence was horrendous air pollution that I was breathing in as I was commuting to and from work or going out with my friends, whatever. And so we did a lot of campaigning that was focused on air quality because that was something impacting people's lives. And one of the best things that you can do for air quality is, one, not chop down the trees that exist in your city, and two, plant a lot more trees. But oftentimes that goal of reducing or eliminating urban deforestation is at conflict with urban development projects, highways, skyscrapers, business parks, etc. And so there was this tension between the state and local governments and what the residents of Bangalore and the state of Karnataka wanted. And so we launched campaigns on WhatsApp where we would get people to take action and spread the word on WhatsApp. Every single campaign that we basically launched ended up going super duper viral because people are, one, passionate about the issue. WhatsApp is an effective way of reaching people in India. And anyway, so for me, like, that is what I left with, when I left India and came back to the United States to work here. And I will say, I'm really happy to report that the Harris campaign did achieve a lot of that, right? For the first time in a really long time. And I think this had a lot to do with Kamala Harris's Indian American identity. But there's so much content about the Harris campaign that was being shared on all of the WhatsApp groups I'm on. And these WhatsApp groups are like my aunties and uncles who live in India or who live in America, who live in Canada, who live in the UK. Like, they're not, people, mine and your age. So it reaches and mobilizes and persuades this whole different universe of individuals. And so I think I saw that happen on the Harris campaign, but writ large, we don't do enough as a party to engage on WhatsApp and to build out strategies on tools and apps like WhatsApp. It's changing a little bit, but we do need to do more.
Yeah. Why? So we sort of talked about this already, but why are Republicans better at getting attention for their messages? And how do you think Democrats can be like, obviously, like, they've invested heavily, they literally own the platforms at this point. But like, is there a way that we can change the framing, or do we just need a whole new approach? Like, what's your take on all this? And it fits into the dark woke conversation, but it's obviously broader than that as well.
Yeah. Republicans are better at grabbing attention because they're shameless. They will just do and say the thing that gets attention, even if it's a lie, even if it's immoral, even if it's anti-constitutional, even if it pisses on the graves of our founding fathers. They do not give a flying fuck. Democrats have shame. And that is a key difference between our parties, or at least the elected leaders within the two parties. And frankly, I don't know what to do about that. I think having shame is good, but right. I think that there's a level to which that we just need to stop caring so much about how this is going to play, or what the polling might later reveal, and just say the thing that feels true. So I think this shamelessness thing is something I don't have a solution for. Except my advice is say the thing that feels true, be authentic, be news cycle driven, find creative, compelling, novel ways of inserting yourself into the news of the day, into the discourse, right? Don't try to create your own news cycle. Engage with the news cycle as it is, and be a part of the conversation, and insert your values and your vision and the things that you care about. But the second thing is the infrastructure, right? From newspapers to radio stations to podcasts to cable news and beyond, there is so much MAGA media infrastructure, and Elon owns Twitter. That we just do not have the same type of partisan political infrastructure on the left. That is beginning to change. I actually think progressive YouTubers and podcasters are some of the best examples of how that's beginning to, live streaming, the first people to become successful at live streaming were not right-wing or MAGA, they were progressive, right? But then MAGA saw how effective it was, and immediately the billionaires started mobilizing. They were like, we're going to pay people to do this type of content. And this is the thing that I want people to understand. This right-wing media ecosystem that we all are jealous of, that kicks our ass, didn't just happen by mistake, right? Right-wing billionaires over decades made a concerted effort to invest a shit ton of money to make it happen. Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk have been on the payroll of right-wing billionaires forever, right? And so when Ben Shapiro, I think his company recently, there was news about him filing bankruptcy or whatever. none of that stuff is really real. Like I imagine some of his funding went away after Trump won the election, and then he had to scramble to figure it out. But the right wing is serious. Like if you know how to go viral and get attention, like you will probably find an email or a text message or a phone call from a representative of a right-wing billionaire who is willing to pay you to continue to make lots more of that type of content, so that it's not just a side job. Like, for example, Josh, like, I mean, you have this podcast, you just do this part-time. You're like waking up on a Friday morning to do this podcast, and no one's paying you for it, right? But
just my sponsor, who I appreciate very much. But yes, nobody is paying me for this podcast. There's no billionaire backing anything that I do. Let's say that.
No, but like, just we have so many content creators on our side that are great at what they do. They know how to grab attention. They know how to, like, effectively share our values, share our messages. But they're just kind of, many of them are struggling, right? Like, many of them are struggling to pay their bills. And if we are able to actually empower those individuals so that they don't have to worry about paying their bills and they can focus on creating content more full time, I think that can make a seismic difference. But it's not just about, like, ensuring that our content creators and podcasters and etc. get paid. It's also about it's also about just, like, honestly, buying, owning, expanding radio stations, local TV stations, newspapers, all those sorts of things. They're launching media companies. For example, like Courier News is a really good example of.
Love Courier, for sure.
If we didn't have Courier right now, like, where would we go?
I know, right? It's pretty wild how, like, can you name I mean, there's, like, Crooked Media and Courier. There's a few other more, like, very independent ones. Obviously, like Midas Touch is doing some cool things, but, like, as far as, like, with real reporting and, like, it's just another level. Like, it's pretty much Crooked and Courier, and then you've got all of the, I mean, there's like 100 right-wing ones doing comparable things on their side, and it's quite a disparity for sure.
Yeah, and we don't have any. We have nothing to compete with Fox News or News Nation,
right?
Or what's that? Or
OAN.
Yeah, like, they have 3 right-wing broadcast cable news channels. We have MSNBC, sort of, like CNN is center right. MSNBC is maybe center left, but even then, like, not all the time. And whereas, like, yeah, so we have to invest in infrastructure, because if we don't invest in infrastructure, it doesn't matter how many cool, compelling comm strategies and trends we come up with. They're going to flood the zone, and we're not going to be able to compete.
Yeah. You ran digital for Wisconsin Democratic Party, and you worked pretty high up with the Harris campaign. Where do you think we as a party got it wrong on messaging and strategy? And where do you think we got it right on messaging and strategy?
Oh, man.
2024 specifically, or just in general?
I'll start with where we got it wrong. I think where we got it wrong is we just let the right wing drive the discourse and frame the election on their terms, without meaningful pushback and reframing, right? And so the MAGA wanted to make the 2024 election about xenophobia and transphobia. They succeeded.
Yeah, they did.
Our approach was, we're gonna, like, ignore their hate and instead just drive our message about economy, prices, the fact that they're coming after Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and those are all effective messages. But I think unless we directly address their narratives, diffuse them, and inoculate against them, then we're only doing half the job. It's not enough for us to, like, in a disciplined way, like, drive our narrative, but we have to attack and destroy their hateful narratives. And I think part of this is just because of the chaos of this last cycle, right? Like, first Biden was the nominee, and then the debate happened, and then there was, like, whatever, that weird period, and then he stepped down, and then Kamala Harris became the nominee. We just didn't have enough time to, like, properly define either candidate or our issues, right? Like we essentially had 107 days to run a presidential general election campaign that Donald Trump had been running every single day since January 6th, 2021.
Or even 2015, like, I mean, he just never really stopped. He'd been running for president for 10 years in some capacity. And right, we had 107 days. And yeah, no, fair. I was listening to a non-political podcast recently, and there was like a messaging advertising sort of like guru type guy on there. Like he'd done some pretty big things in his life. And it's not a political podcast, but he brought up the power of that they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. And at first I rolled my eyes, and he was certainly not making an argument for or against Donald Trump. He was talking about messaging and words. But his argument was that was the most brilliant line of the campaign because it framed the entire conversation about the fact that there's immigrants in this community, and that's a problem. And it didn't matter if they were eating the dogs and the cats. And yes, Trump went on to be roasted on TikTok, as I'm sure you saw and everybody listening saw. But it changed the whole conversation to force us to talk about things on his terms. And I thought that, I rolled my eyes at the idea because it was like, he sounded like an idiot. He sounded unhinged when he said it, but it's true. It forced a conversation about something on his terms for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We were stuck talking about whether or not they were eating the dogs and the cats, not whether or not there were immigrants in this community. Now, we could have, as a party, made an argument that immigration is good. And in fact, this community had welcomed these immigrants in, and that these immigrants were making the community stronger and better. And I think we tried to make that argument, but we were just drowned out in the conversation of whether or not they were eating the dogs and the cats. And I thought it was a pretty powerful idea, like his ability to like own news cycles he was shameless. Like I would never say something like that because I knew it wasn't true. And he sounded like he sounded unhinged, but here he was like owning the news cycle for a month because he knew how to frame the conversation in a way that was guaranteed to get attention. So I don't know that Donald Trump is replicatable in the Republican Party, which like gives me a tiny glimmer of hope. Like JD Vance is not going to pull that off in the same way, nor is certainly like Ron DeSantis. And so I do wonder what the world looks like the next time Donald Trump is not the Republican nominee, but it is a real problem that like one guy can come in and like own the narrative of like everything the media is talking about in such a powerful way. So like, I definitely agree, like whether it's dark woke or dark Brandon or something else, like we need to find a different way to like have our messages getting shared in the WhatsApp channels. So WisDems, your old friends at WisDems, my friends at WisDems just helped crush Elon here in Wisconsin. He obviously spent absurd amounts of money trying to buy a seat on the Wisconsin State Supreme Court. You want to talk about that race? You were following from afar, I imagine, but yeah, talk to us about any thoughts on what your friends did?
Yeah, Ben Wickler, Chuck Engel, the senior staff at the WisDems Honorary, they're just the best at what they do. And I am so grateful to have worked alongside them, learned alongside them. And in 2023, which was the first time that I worked on a Wisconsin State Supreme Court race, the Janet Protasevich election, we essentially, wrote a playbook together as a senior staff, as a state party on how do we contest these Supreme Court races during April odd years where April and odd years where turnout is really low, and the right wing can bring so much money to the table, right?
Yep.
And I don't know if you remember, but the 2023 election ended up being at that point the most expensive election of all time
until this year, in Wisconsin.
Until this year, right? And so we kind of like wrote this like playbook on how to capture the public's imagination, drive the narrative, and just like dramatically jack up turnout for Democrats across the state. That playbook works. And that is like exactly the playbook that they executed this time, except for this time, Elon Musk was pouring ungodly sums of money into the race. And what I really appreciated about what they did this time is that they made the 2025 Wisconsin State Supreme Court race a referendum on Elon Musk's and billionaires and their ability to buy state Supreme Court seats.
Was that an obvious strategy to you, or did you have like concerns that might backfire? as somebody who like had been inside, but like now is very much outside in Seattle, Washington, like, was it clear to you that that was the right path? Because I saw what they were doing and it was like, okay, cool, this is what we're doing, let's do it. But like, I didn't see the polling. I didn't know like what was happening. So I'm just curious, like as somebody who's like been in the room, is it obvious that that's what we should have done, or only in hindsight is it obvious? And at the time, did it seem like a gamble?
I mean, the strategic risk there, right? Like the pitfall is that every single time you evoke and make the race about Elon, he gets mad and writes another $5-10 million check, and pumps even more money in the race, right?
Yep.
But I think I encourage Democrats across the country to engage in the type of like strategic narrative positioning that the WisDems engage in, and like don't. And this is there is a parallel to the 2024 election here, where Elon came in and spent 25 million plus to try to buy a state Supreme Court seat, but the WisDems and the coalition, the kind of the Democratic coalition, they relentlessly attacked Elon Musk every single time Elon wrote a new check. There was a new press statement, a new news cycle about Elon trying to buy the state Supreme Court seat. They spent millions in TV and digital ads to attack Elon, right? And at the same time, you know, like when we think about that like famous I'm on your side, Kamala's for they, them, transphobic ad from this last cycle, yep. Right? The reason I bring that up is what I said before, we kind of didn't have a response to that. Like we kind of just let them do it. But I don't think we should ever let the right wing just do things. Like I think if they are doing things that they see as effective, then we need to figure out a way of like diffusing the strategy and inoculating against it. And so I think that, you know, that there was a risk to the strategy of like making it a referendum on Elon, but actually I think that like attacking Republicans and their strategies as they do things that they feel are effective to win elections and kind of like diffusing their impact, that's like the generalized kind of principle from all of this. I think that's really important, and that's a lesson I think more people should take away.
Yeah.
Wait, sorry. Did that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. I think that. I think we struggle with the idea of how much to be reactive versus proactive as a party. We have an agenda. We have messaging. We certainly have values. And I think a lot of folks struggle with the idea that we're spending a lot of time like responding. And I certainly think like, you know, the 2016 campaign, we got trapped in this situation where Donald Trump could say anything and it was national news and we like had to reply to it. And we've gotten better at not living in that world, but not that much better. And so that's what I heard you say was the idea that like, we should not ignore their messaging. We should take it head on. We should not cede the point. I do worry that like, and I mean, I not even worry, like as somebody who works campaigns, like it's hard. Like you need to be pushing your message, but if you're like living in their messaging, they've won the debate already. So it's like, how do you do it in a way that doesn't cede the space? So if we're spending all of our time pushing back on their transphobia, are we making the race about the trans community, which obviously I don't think we should cede an inch, on that front. Like I stand with the trans community 100%. And I want to say that loudly and proudly, but I also don't want like nobody, it's not good for anybody if that's what this campaign is about. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's not good for the trans community. It's not good for the electorate. Like that's not the conversation that we should be having. So I do struggle with like, where is the line between like standing up for the communities that are under attack and like making the campaign about that. And like, again, we never really had a good response to that one ad, like for sure. But I do think Elon was an interesting example and you sort of like laid it out, every time you wrote a check, that became a story. Every time you put out a new ad, that became a story. So like turning what they're doing into the story is an interesting model. And I think like a helpful way to like think about it.
And into a liability. And,
right.
And specifically, like, I just think that like messaging that's like, the reason why the other campaign wants to talk about trans Americans and immigrants who contribute a ton to our country is to distract you from the fact that they want to destroy the Constitution, take away all your rights, wreck the economy, and take away your Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. Like, there's a way of doing the message that like addresses their bullshit, attacks it, and pivots to our message so that we're taking the attention that we get from the conflict, right, which is us taking their attacks head on and using it to drive our message and drive our narrative. And I think part of it is just respecting voters more. Like, voters are smarter than we give them credit for. And if we put forward that kind of like address their message, pivot, nuance approach, I think it can really work. I've seen it work. I think that is what they did in Wisconsin. That's what the WisDems have done for cycles now, and it's been effective. I think everybody else in the country should learn from it.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, folks certainly look to. Absolutely. So you work in digital, but you describe yourself as well as like a digital person, as a technologist. So I'm wondering how that lens shapes the way you think about political strategy beyond just messaging. Like, you and I do similar things, I would imagine, day to day, but like, you like really lean into the technology side of things, and I'm very focused on like the storytelling side of things. So walk me through, like, where do you see the difference? And like, obviously technology like plays a role in everything digital does, but like, how are you approaching technology differently from other folks?
Yeah, so when I first like entered this digital political campaigning industry, what the industry was figuring out how to use email to effectively land in people's inboxes. So optimizing for high deliverability opens and clicks to get people to take action. Like, it just started in this, like, how to get in people's inboxes, and this was
this with Color of Change or before that?
This was long. This was at Move On, which was my first cool. job out of college in 2011. But since then, right, and I've been kind of a paid professional in this industry for about 15 years now. Probably been doing this work for about 2 decades. Every single time the internet evolves, we as digital strategists have to evolve our practice, right? So I have gone from like email as my like core expertise and tool and strategy to social media as like Facebook and Twitter became more prominent, to SMS and peer-to-peer as it became more relevant and salient, to vertical video platforms and podcasts, and now content creation, influencers, to now like figuring out how are we going to leverage these large language models and LLM powered tools like ChatGPT and Gemini to do more effective work as campaigners, strategists, and then there are like other tools that I've worked with, like WhatsApp, right, that have allowed me to win campaigns. So when I think about technology really deeply and its potential to be leveraged for us to do the type of mass communications and mass mobilization that we need to in order to, look, I use the phrase anti-MAGA majority a lot because it's true. MAGA is like a 33%, maybe less plurality of people in this country. The super majority of people in this country are outside of MAGA, right? And those are the voters that we need to speak to. But because of how large and complex our country is, there's so many different ways of reaching them that we have to think critically and creatively about technology. And often I found that, off-the-shelf technology is much more, and when I say off-the-shelf, it's like tools that you can like pay a $10, $15 subscription to every month and get access to is way more effective, and the return on investment is way higher than trying to build something from scratch. I've in previous roles, I have worked to build like tech from scratch. When I was at 350.org back in the day, building basically a tool set that allowed any of our affiliates around the world to like spin up their own microsites. That's good. It has its place. It's also kind of hard and expensive and takes a lot of investment. Oftentimes I found that like off the shelf tools are just as effective, at least in terms of like the type of work that I focus on.
And the world has changed so much. Like, I mean, 15 years ago, like if you wanted to spin up a quick website, it was a process. Now you can go to card.co and for free build something in like a matter of 20 minutes. It's like, if you're still building from scratch today, you better have a good reason to be doing so, because there's just no reason. And I do think I work with a lot of campaigns and like, the delta between what's out there and what they know is out there is often very wide. And a big part of my job as like a digital consultant is like helping people understand, like, I literally have a newsletter called Free Digital Tools that every 2 weeks I send out 2 free digital tools, because there's just so many free digital tools out there that can make your life better and stronger and more powerful, but like people don't know that they exist. So I've started collecting and sharing them. I'm kind of obsessed with digital tools. So
yeah, me too. And especially the ones that you can just like either get free or off the shelf, you know, that
for sure.
They're so helpful. Even like Slack is a good example of this, right? The Bernie and Warren and later the Biden and Harris presidential campaigns used Slack great effect to manage volunteers, but you know, building an ecosystem like Slack from scratch would be very intensive. But instead, you can just pay Salesforce a little bit of money and you know, like have an amazing and powerful tool to do distributed organizing tactics.
Yeah. If you were training a new crop of digital staffers, what advice would you give them?
My advice is writing is the most important skill in the digital space. Get your, like, if you're a good writer, you can be successful as a digital strategist, because a lot of it is about seeing what's in the world and rapidly translating it into a campaign plan that's executable with like punchy messaging, but also like a project plan with timeline and milestones and the technology we want to use and how we want to use it. And so like for me, like if you're interested in, you know, becoming a digital strategist, like focus on creating sharp writing and becoming an excellent project manager.
I'll echo that and say that I started in this field as a writer editor. Like that was how I got started. I was like literally writing web copy for, you know, websites and whatnot, and then found my way into digital like through that role. So yeah, I think that's I totally agree that like if you can't write, it doesn't matter what tools you have, like they're not going to work for you. And you don't have to be an amazing writer. You have to be able to write in a way that people can like follow what you're thinking. So like you don't have to be like a poet. You have to be like, I'd rather be a Hemingway than you know, like than writing something that's so complicated. Like, yeah, find a way to like take what's in your brain and like share it with people. I totally agree with that. You've talked about a bunch of people that you are looking to right now doing digital. Anybody else you want to shout out in or outside of politics that you think's doing digital well right now?
I want to shout out Indivisible. I don't know how many people are on their email list, but they send
a good one.
The best, I think the best email out of
they're real good emails.
Anybody, because the emails are like, they're clear, have really compelling like copy and calls to action, but they're not like manipulative, right? They are like each email is honestly like, it reads to me like a political treatise. Like, this is what's happening in the world right now, and this is what we can do about it. Here are 5 ways for you to take effective action and like write letters. I like that approach from Indivisible a lot. I think in the state party world, like the WisDems, let's continue to crush it. Frankly, yeah, like, you know, one of the only state parties in the country that has like an always viral approach to digital. I really like some of the more recent work I've seen out of the North Carolina Democratic Party. I like the way that they are kind of like executing their brand. It just feels really like fresh and vibrant and appealing. And
we're big Anderson Clayton fans here for sure, no doubt.
Yeah, for sure. And then finally, like I have to like shout out just the tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of like content creators that are creating content every single day, like on behalf of like the Democratic Party and progressive values, and just trying to figure out like novel, creative ways of like breaking through. I think looking to them for lessons and best practices is really important. There's a lot of knowledge and good ideas there. There might also be a lot of bad ideas, but like,
sure,
you know,
gotta test them sometimes too. You know,
anytime you have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people like doing something every single day to try to figure out a way of breaking through, like, you got to pay attention to that. And so increasingly, I've been just, you know, follow, you know, that's like what my social media feeds consist of, like all the content creators that I think are doing good work, and just like scrolling through their content to see what's resonating and what's not.
Cool. You want to talk at all about what you're up to these days and how folks can keep up with you moving forward?
Yeah. So I just got married recently. Got this ring to prove it. And so
I think you brought a bunch of the WisDems to India, right?
I did bring a bunch of WisDems to India,
awesome.
which was fun. And so at this point, I'm kind of, thinking about what my next steps are. I haven't made any like concrete like steps or decisions yet. But if folks want to keep up with me, find me on Blue Sky. I think my handle is at bhavik.bluesky.net or something.
I'll link it in the show notes, but okay.
Yeah, find me on Blue Sky. In full transparency, like I hate Elon's health site, even though I'm a little like addicted to it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to use it less and less. And I've built a pretty good community on Blue Sky over the last like few months. And so I'm pretty excited about the platform.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking. And yeah, I appreciated your leadership in the state and beyond, and look forward to seeing, I look forward to continuing to follow your digital journey as you help train the next crop. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Josh. This was a lot of fun.